My name is Ron Hood, and I want to welcome you to Volume 14 of the Woodsmaster series, where we teach you to be the Woodsmaster. Now, in this volume of the Woodsmaster, we're going to be talking about some crafts for the fields. We want to show you some of the things that people have asked us about over the years. And we're going to do it all right down here in the Hood's Woods basement, where we keep all the weird stuff we've accumulated over all these years. We're going to show you some neat things, some neat tricks, some stuff that's going to keep you busy on the rainy and snowy days and might keep you indoors. So without further ado, let's get started. The first thing I want to do is start showing you a little bit about body parts as rulers. I'm doing that because sometimes you don't actually have a ruler in the wilderness when you want to make some of the stuff that you want to make. Sometimes you need to know how big a fish is or lots of other stuff. But anyway, there's always a reason or a use for measurements. So we're going to start out with a knife and a piece of wood. Let me show you. First thing I'm going to do is just stick that piece of wood with that knife so you can see that I've got a little line right here. Now what I want to do is I want to measure the parts of the body that I feel I'm going to be using for measuring. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stick my finger out like so, and I'm going to measure to the back side of my finger. This line here between the knife and the inside of the web of my finger is a measurement that I might be able to use. I'm going to take the first knuckle to the second knuckle on my pointing finger like so. Mark that off about like so. Now you can see that distance is about half that distance. Another measurement I'm going to take is I'm going to spread my fingers as wide as I can like so, and I'm going to mark the tip of my little finger. Remember, the other finger, the thumb, is up against the blade. So now I have another measurement here. Now what I can do is I can take a standard ruler and set it down here, and I find out that the length of the distance from the first knuckle to the second knuckle is 1.5 inches. If I measure the distance from the tip of my finger to the web of my finger, that's 2.5. If I measure the distance across the palm of my hand, or rather out to the tip of my fingers, that's 8.5. Don't worry if you can't read these numbers. That doesn't make any difference because you'd be doing it for yourself. Here's another measurement. How wide is your hand? Lay it in there and check it right at the knuckle. That distance there is 4 inches. So if I need 4 inches, the width of the palm of my hand is 4 inches. If I need 1.5 inches, it's the knuckles. 2.5, it's the finger. 4, it's the palm. The whole hand is 8.5. So that gives me some numbers. It gives me a way to do some measuring. And most of what we're going to be doing here is going to be done with finger and hand measurements. I'm going to try to stay away from the ruler as much as possible. But this is kind of a handy thing to know about. So now let's get started with some of the techniques. One of the materials that we're going to be working with here is called Kydex, and this is a little piece of Kydex right here. Kydex is what's called a thermoplastic. If you apply heat to it, it softens up, and then you can manipulate it into different shapes. Of course, it's hot when you're moving it around or trying to twist it, so you got to be careful you don't burn yourself. But how do you make this rigid, tough plastic into something that you could form into a into a sheath or a gun case or whatever else that you need? Well, you use heat. And one of the easiest ways to do it is a heat gun like this one here. I picked this one up at a discount tool mart. I think this one in $2003 cost me about $15, and it's, I guess, let's see, it's about a 1500 watt jobber. Puts out some good heat, and it's got two different speed levels. Listen. Low and blast! Now, it's got some little elements right at the end. Watch this. Takes a little while to heat it up, but as we do, woo, look at there. Melts right over. So you can see now that this is nice and soft. See that? Nice and flexible. Now watch this. we're just going to let it cool off a little bit, and it's going to assume that shape. And that's exactly the property we're looking for when we're making things like sheaths for our knives or for holsters for our guns or whatever else it is that you want. So we'll give it a few seconds here to cool off. Now, a couple of points about this stuff. It comes in a lot of different thicknesses and a whole bunch of different colors, and you could buy this from plastic suppliers in just about any large city. It's relatively inexpensive. I think a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet costs something like $30 or $40. So it's not particularly expensive, and of course you don't have to buy that much when you go out to purchase it. If you buy smaller amounts, it'll probably cost you more. Now it's cooled. You can see there, it's just as strong as it was before we heated it. It's nice and springy and so forth, but it's in a new shape, and that's what we're after. We want something that's fairly easy to work with. Now there are other ways to heat this stuff up. One of those is to put it in your oven in your house. But I need to give you a little word of warning on that. This stuff is a plastic, and if you heat it up too much, it's going to kick off some fumes. The first part of those fumes is, well, they're not pleasant smelling fumes. They're plastic, so you probably won't enjoy the odor unless you're into plastic. Another thing is that they possibly are toxic. I don't mean this is the kind of thing that's going to turn you into a guy with conniption fits or anything like that. It's just something that over time can probably build up and give you plastic lungs. So you probably don't want to do a lot of this kind of forming inside your oven. However, what temperature does it start to soften at? Well, this stuff softens at somewhere between 250 and 300 degrees Fahrenheit. And around that temperature it's fairly easy to work. When it gets up to about 400 degrees or 450, it starts to bubble. Now it doesn't lose too much strength when it starts to bubble, but that's about where you've got to stop heating it up. But remember now, whenever you're manipulating it, you're going to be working with something that's anywhere from 200 to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and that means if you pick it up, you're going to burn yourself. So you have to find ways to manipulate it where you don't put your hands in contact with it. Well, I got a couple of projects I want to show you how to do, so we might as well get started with those. Well, hello, Nietzsche. Yeah, our puppy dog decided to come in and join us here.
She's a little girl, Nietzsche.
She's a girl. Well, here we go. Back to it. We've got a couple of odds and ends here that I've worked out over the years that make it a little bit easier when you're doing these inside projects like this. I know that these kinds of projects can make a heck of a mess if you're doing them inside your house, and you can get a lot of complaints from that. So what I've got is a little fold-up table that I do most of my stuff on, and I've covered it with a towel. The reason for the towel being here is it keeps things from sliding around too much on the table, because the table is made out of a plastic. Now, as a cutting surface, I went down to one of these dollar stores and I picked up a cutting board. This is a cheapo cutting board. I think this one here cost me $1, and it's made of some kind of plastic, but it works great. It's just a butcher kind of a cutting board, and you can do things to it like that, and boy, it just doesn't show any marks at all, hardly. Well, I'll make a mark on it. Now I feel better. There you go. So this is what I work on. I do a lot of my cutting on that, and that helps me to stop from cutting the towel I've got. Now, when you're working with Kydex, you need to make a form of some kind, a pattern. And one of the best cardboards that I've found is this stuff here. It's just a file folder. Buy a box of these babies, and this kind of plastic, paper. This kind of paper here is real good for forms. And we'll just go ahead and get started here. What I'll do, well, I don't want to use that one. I'll use this one here. I like the way this one opens. I'll just go ahead and slice it off. So I'm only working with a part of it. Now what I want to do is I want to make a little sheath for this knife here. This is a Furman Cold Fury blade, and although I have a leather sheath for it, I really want to make a nice Kydex sheath that's good and strong and will protect me should I ever decide to fall on this blade. So I need to make some kind of a pattern. I have to decide what kind of a sheath I want to make, and that's where we're going to get started on the sheath. The way I usually start out with a sheath is I lay the knife out lengthwise on my cardboard that I'm going to be using for a pattern. And I've got the blade edge facing the edge of the paper, as you can see here, and it's in about an inch or so. And I've got about a half an inch or so from the tip to the edge of the paper. So the knife sits about like this. Now I'm just going to flip the knife over like that, and this gives me the other side of the sheath. And I'm going to come in with my pen up to the height I want the sheath to be, and then I'm going to go across like so to where the belt loop is going to be. Basically, that's all there is to the pattern. Now, this is going to be the inside of the plastic and the inside of the sheath. So I'm going to write, whoops, I took spelling when I was in school, inside on it, something like that. So now what we want to do is we want to cut it out. And this is where we grab our next tool, the scissor. Now don't worry if you don't do this exactly right. You know, we got a philosophy here. Good enough, close enough, well enough, all that kind of stuff. And Kydex is a very, very forgiving material. You can fix up the mistakes you make after you get the basic thing made. So this is our basic sheath pattern at this point. Now how's it going to work? I've got the blade facing to the outside here, not in towards the folded side. And there's a reason for that, which you'll see a little bit later. What I'm going to do is just fold this over like so. This is kind of how you test the pattern. Get that thing out of here. About like so. There we go. And that's how the sheath is going to kind of look. I'm going to bring it down, so let's see here, down till it's about like that. And that's about how the sheath will work. This part here will fold over and create the belt loop. Now, I don't like the look of that. That's just pretty square. So what I'm going to do is try to figure out about where the blade is in here. And I can see that it's right there, and I need about a half an inch, a little bit more. So I'll go ahead and nip that off, like so. Fold it over. Match that nip, like this. Remember, you can correct all this stuff in the Kydex when you go to work. So now our sheath is going to look something like this. And that's all there is to it. Something else I ought to tell you about this little sheath here. It's going to be good and sturdy. It's going to hold this knife very well. But I really don't like the look of Kydex all that much. There's some beautiful Kydex sheaths out there, but it's so military looking. So what I'm going to do after we get done making this Kydex sheath is we're going to cover it with leather. And that's something that I do with just about all of my knives. The Kydex is a good, sturdy, almost penetration-proof material to form the outside of the sheath, and then the leather gives it that woodsy look. So we're going to cover this with leather after we get done. But there we go. That's the basics of it. Now all I have to do is form this out of Kydex. So let's go to the next step. I cut a piece of that Kydex off the roll, and you can see it's got a little bit of a curl to it. And I don't like to work with curls like that, so I'm just going to hit it with the heat gun a little bit to kind of bring it down. So we'll just blow for a while. Okay, that's flat enough for me. Now I've got to go ahead and turn this into my sheath. We have the pattern that we cut, and remember I wrote inside. Well, the shiny part of the Kydex is going to be the inside. I always do it that way because it's easier on the knife, and the rougher side out there is better for gluing your leather to it. So I'm just going to go ahead and back this up there. In fact, I'm going to leave a little extra length on the portion here that's going to go over my belt just in case I want some more. It's hard to add it, but it's easy to leave it on when I'm cutting. And I'll go ahead and mark off my pattern. like so. Now that I've got a pattern on there and I can barely see it, I'll go ahead and start cutting it. Now Kydex can be cut a lot of different ways. You can cut it with a knife, as I've been doing, or you can use a pair of scissors or a pair of side cutters. These are tin snips. Either way, it'll cut it pretty well. All right, I'm just going to use my knife here. Once you cut it, you can kind of tear the stuff like so. There it is. Simple as that. Now we're ready to start assembling our blade, our sheath. The pattern I made now that you saw me make was for a left carry sheath. And what that means is this. The edge faces towards the rear of your body. So if I fold it like this and I put it on my body, it'll hang with the rear facing, with the edge facing to the rear of my body. Now if I want to carry it on the right side, you see how I marked this? This is marked inside, there you go, inside left. If I want to carry it on the right side, just flip it over. And this would be the inside of the right side carry. So the sheath would then go together in this manner, and with the edge towards the rear, it would fold over like so, with the blade towards the rear. So this one pattern can make either left or right side carry sheaths, depending on what you have, as long as you have it identified for the inside of the Kydex. So I made two different blanks here off that same pattern. This one here would be for the right side carry, and this one here for the left side carry. Let's go ahead and make the right side carry so we can see what she looks like. Now, I've got this thing just about all ready to go here, and you can see I've got the approximate position for the blade when I put it in here. But something you need to know, when this plastic folds over onto this and starts to hook on, it has a tendency to stick. And the way you beat that is this. This is some of that non-stick cooking stuff, brand name, and you can use any kind you want. But what I usually do is I take my blade or whatever it is that I'm spraying. Let me get my glasses out of here, or I'll be looking through a bubbled universe. I just spray a little bit of this stuff on there to kind of keep the plastic from sticking to it. That helps a little bit. Now that's quite a little bit on there, and I always put a little extra on it, and then come back and wipe it off lightly. I don't need too much on there, and I don't want to goop everything up, but just enough of a coating so the plastic won't stick to the blade. And that's how it's going to go. So the next step is to prepare for the heating. So let's go to that step. When you go to mold the Kydex, what I like to do is I like to have a kind of a padded surface down here, and it turns out that old towels work out pretty good. They're a little bit flexible, and they'll take up some of the shape of the knife. If I press down on it, it's going to take more of the shape of the knife as I push into the Kydex. I also keep available a little another little towel, a washcloth. So we might as well start heating it up. Now, by the way, one of the things you want to do is if you're working with a knife, or a gun for that matter, you don't want to heat the metal up before you need to. So I'll just set that aside, and we'll start heating the Kydex. The first thing to do is to heat the seam. That's the area where you're going to be folding over and the spine of the knife is going to be resting. So that'll be right in this area here. So that'll be our first area to heat. Then we're going to fold it over, and then we're actually going to try to mold it to the shape of the blade itself. You all ready? Vroom. You want to play the heat gun back and forth So you heat the whole thing evenly. Remember, it's pretty hot, and you can get a fire started on your terry cloth if you're not careful. At this point, what we're trying to do is just to press the knife into the plastic where we think we want it to be. I want it about like that. And this way it gives me a chance to check to see if the location is right. Now the coolness of the blade is going to help to cool the Kydex a little bit faster. And I like to keep a little bit of pressure on here. When professionals do it, they have special rubber things that they use to press down on it, and that keeps a lot of pressure on the Kydex while it forms to the blade. And I'm actually going to be using the tightness of the Kydex on the blade to hold the blade in place. Right there is a serviceable sheath. Of course, we're far from being done. And you can see it didn't exactly line up on the edges. That doesn't make any difference. That's why we cut so much extra material. The next thing we're going to do now is, now that it's sort of in place, is I'm going to heat up the surface of this and try to get a little bit more conformation with the blade itself. So we'll heat that up, and to do that I'm going to remove the blade once again. Now things may move around on you a little bit, so don't let that worry you. You can always fix it up in, as we call it, post-production. Every once in a while you can poke it with your finger to see if it's getting soft. You don't do it for a long time, you don't linger on it, it won't hurt you. It looks like it's pretty soft. We're ready. Woo! There goes the heat gun. There we go. That's about how we wanted it. Now the only thing that I didn't do, I didn't get done quite right, is I didn't put my my heat gun down safely. It fell off the edge of the table, but things happen. There we go. Now that's good and tight. Now you may be able to barely make out the outline of the blade. It's right in here, right in this area here. So with that in place, now what we're going to do is we're going to do a little carving. We're going to cut around the outside of this and make this sheath into something that's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. Now that we've got it shaped, what I want to do is find out about where the tip falls, and looks like it just about where we wanted. So I'm going to go down here a little ways, and I'm going to mark about where I think I may want to end our sheath. Now I know that the knife is right in this area here, and I want about a half or so of an inch out from the edge of the blade for the final sheath. So I'm just going to come up and cut this about like that on a little line that goes about like this and about like that, which is about how the blade is shaped. To do that, we're going to use our tin snips, but the knife comes out first. So we'll just get in here. Now this stuff is tough. You can try this with a knife, but probably be at it for a while. There we go. It's nice to have a strong table so when you're pressing down it doesn't collapse everything into your lap, especially if you got knives and stuff there. There we go. So there's the rough outline of the sheath. And what I'm going to do is just trim it up a little bit. Now remember, this is going to be covered with leather, so we don't have to worry too much about the beauty of the thing. This is not a beautiful thing. It's just supposed to be functional and try to keep the blade from whacking you in the leg. So, well, looky there, got a little crook. How do we fix that? Heat. So we're going to put a little bit more heat on this thing now, and we're going to do a little straightening. There we go. You notice I'm just using a little pan to hold this down. You can hold it down with just about anything but your fingertip. There we go. And that's straight enough. Now what I want to do is make certain that not only does the sheath keep the blade away from my skin, but it also helps to retain the blade in the sheath. And to do that, I'm going to bend this little tab here over just a little bit above the guard, this portion here, on the blade. So I'm just going to heat that up a little bit and press it down. That's about it. Now we just have to wait for it to cool off a bit. It still looks pretty shoddy, but don't worry about that because sandpaper, grinding, and that kind of thing could fix it up. If you wanted to use just the Kydex as a sheath, you've probably got something that's functional now. There we go. So now we've got a little bit of a tab here holding that in. And as soon as this cools off even a little bit more, it's going to hold it nice and tight. And that's about how she goes together. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this is a little bit smoother than what we've got. So I'll take out some sandpaper, remove the knife. It's not a good idea to have your blade slip out of the sheath and cut your fingers while you're working on your sheath. Fast and dirty, folks. There we go. This stuff is like a stray dog. Cleans up real good. There we go. There it is. Now, if you want to put a little bit more tension in this thing, you can put some rivets in along the extra spacing here that you left on the side. The kind of rivets that I like to use are pop rivets. Let me show you a little bit about those. The next thing we want to do is a couple of little things for the future. One of those things for the future is to drill a hole. This is about an 1/8 inch hole right through the tip of the sheath. That's to allow water to drain out. If you get water or sand in there, there's a tendency for it to collect. And if you leave like a little drain hole in there, it helps out. You can put a larger hole in there if you'd like to. Now I like to put a little reinforcement in the sheath by drilling a couple of extra holes like this. This keeps the sheath from splitting. Let me show you how. I drill some holes in here now, and what I want to do is put some pop rivets in through those holes like this. And the pop rivet is going to hold the two halves together. Now, one side of the rivet here has a flat area on it that's going to distribute the force, but the other side, when it swells out, isn't going to do much more than mushroom. So what I tend to do is push this through and then use a little washer on the back side, like so. That way when it swells out, it'll tend to hold it a little bit better. Now if you haven't seen one before, this is a pop rivet gun, and what it does is it just fits over this little shaft, about like so. You hold it together, and then you squeeze like so. When you squeeze, it pulls the back side of the rivet in and swells it out so it locks, and at the same time breaks off the shaft. So now that's well attached. The shaft piece comes out. We'll do it again, like so. Pop another rivet washer on there. Pop it off. We got 2 in there, and then we'll go for number 3, like so. Now this one is a little bit trickier because it's pretty tight, so I'm going to have to squeeze it together. Grunting is an important part of any kind of a construction project like this. There it goes. Ta-da! Now I've got three rivets in there, 3 washers on the back side so it won't pull through, and a small hole. Now that hole isn't big enough to drain, so I'm going to use a Chinese drill. Let's just take your drill and wiggle it around a little bit like that. This is a multi-sized drill that way. And there you are. Now that sheath is pretty solid. Might have to do a little expanding. There we go. Doesn't quite hold it in, but that's going to be taken care of by the string. Whoops. Looks like my rivet came off. Time for another rivet. How do we do that? Well, we take the old rivet out and we go for a longer rivet. This is just part of the joy of making this stuff, especially when you're making it faster. Let's see here. Yeah, there's a nice size right here. I'll just stick this one through. Looks like I get to use the same washer again. I was afraid of this. There we go. There we go, I think. Yeah, that puppy held it. Now when you get to this stage, you might find that wherever you melted it to fit something might be a little bit too tight. So, ta-da! Back to your blower. I'll pull the knife out. This is one of the beauties of these thermoplastics. You can continually readjust them until you get them the way you like them. Well, looky there, it peeled right up. There we go. About like so. Hold it down with my finger. I always like the pain. That's why I like backpacking and survival. I like the pain. Okay, there it is. So now you can see we built ourselves a quickie sheath for our little knife, and it's in there pretty tight. There we go. That will loosen up over time. Now I think we need to put some leather on this thing and make it look good. You're probably wondering about this this belt loop goodie back here. Don't worry about that. We're going to do that after we put the leather on it. So let's go on to the next stage. The next thing I want to do is show you how to make a little holster for a miniature pistol. Now the one that I usually carry with me is this little job here. It's the American Arms 22. It's a 22 revolver, 5-shot. And of course I use this whenever I go bear hunting. I also use it when I'm in the city. But it's an easy little holster to make. It takes about 10 minutes to do out of Kydex. And what's nice about this design is it's got a little snap flap back here that allows it to hang on something like a piece of cord around your neck, so you can carry it in this manner here. If you've got a button-up shirt, You could reach in through the button-up shirt and withdraw it like so. Or you can also attach this to the little pocket, your watch pocket in your pants. And this part of the pistol is down below the actual outside of the pocket and won't wear holes in the bottom of your pocket. Now, it's not just for the 22 here, this little North American Arms. You could do it with any small pistol, any small automatic or revolver. The principles are the same. So let's take a look at how we do this. The way I showed you to make this sheath is just one of many ways to do it. It just happens to be the fastest way I know how to make a good, dependable sheath. If you want to make a Kydex sheath all by itself, one that's not going to be laminated with leather, another way to do it is to lay a piece of your Kydex down like so, take another piece of Kydex, set it on the top, and then heat this top piece of Kydex, and then press down with something that will take the form of the knife, something like a sponge or something of that sort, until it cools off, and then you simply pop rivet these two halves together and you'll have a Kydex sheath. Simple. But what we want to do is we want to have the thinnest possible Kydex sheath, and so we made it out of a single layer, and now we're going to lay on some leather. Now there's a lot of ways to put a piece of leather around a sheath. Let me show you one of the easiest ways I know how to do it. What you do is you start out with your piece of file folder cardboard. Remember, you don't want to do this with a piece of expensive leather. So you lay out your file folder and you take your finger, which is 1.5 inches for me. You want about 1.5 inches from the edge of your sheath to the edge of the pattern you're making. It's about like that. And I'll do it again up here. That's about like so. Now I got about 1.5 inches of extra out there. Next thing you want to do is carefully roll the sheath over. Sounds like a song. And do it again on the back side. Mark about 1.5 inches and 1.5 inches and 1.5 inches, like so. And that gives you a little line. You can see I made some strange dots here. And I'm just going to go ahead and connect the dots like that. Now you're going to have a lot of extra stuff left over when you do this job. Don't worry about that. It's better to have too much than not enough. I guess that's the same way as it is with money, love, and shelter, huh? Okay, so this is your basic pattern. Now what's going to happen is this. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lay, after I cut the leather, I'm going to lay the leather right on here, like so. Kind of square it up around the knife, and now somewhere in here is where the knife is going to go. You'll be able to feel that with the leather. And I'm going to go ahead and just poke the knife into the sheath, and that will make a pocket for the knife, and you'll see. But that's the basic piece, and I'm going to cut that out of a hunk of leather. The leather we're going to use is some of the stuff that was left over from the coat that Karen made for me in Cave Cookin' 3, and this is deer skin. If you look at it, you can see that it stretches a little bit, and that's the kind of characteristic I like on a sheath, because we want it to be nice and tight once we do it. I'll go ahead and lay my pattern on there like this, and you can see I've left a little extra there. I like lots of extra on it. You'll see why. I'll just go ahead and make a little mark here, give me a kind of a rough idea where I want to cut. There we go. I've tried a lot of different kinds of glues in the last few years to find a way to get this leather to attach properly to the Kydex, because Kydex is just naturally resistant to gluing. What I've finally come up with is this stuff here called Duro. It's a all-purpose spray adhesive, and this stuff works pretty good. It's made by Loctite Corporation, and among the ones that I've found, this is about the best that I've been able to locate. It dries pretty quick, and it works really well. It holds this stuff for a lot of years. Well, several years anyway. This is an example here. This is a little piece of leather that I glued onto a hunk of Kydex, and it's on there like that. It's waterproof, and it stays a little sticky for quite a while, and that stickiness just helps to make sure that as this thing gets stretched and pulled and so forth, it works its way down into the pores of the Kydex, and it creates a pretty permanent bond. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm working on English. Now, I've gone ahead and I've set the sheath down on my piece of leather here, as you can see. And what I'm going to do is this. I've positioned the sheath approximately where it needs to be. That's about 1.5 inches in from the edges, like so. Now I know about where the knife is going to be inserted into the sheath, because there's a big hole right there. And at that point, what I'll do is I'll come to the back of the sheath here. Let me turn this around so you can see it like this. This is about where the knife is going in. So what I want to do is draw kind of a line out here like this, and this piece will flop over the top of the sheath, and this piece will flop over there. Now there's a reason for doing the cut in advance. I'll show you that in just a second. Let me make this cut, and I'll show you. There we go. I don't want to go all the way. Now let me turn this around again, like so. Now what's going to happen is this. This piece here will stretch over the top of what's going to be the belt loop, and this piece then will stretch over the top of the sheath itself. And you can see I've got lots of extra material here. That's a real good thing, because I'll be able to turn that into tassels or whatever, but I have something to work with now. But that's kind of how it's all going to go together. In order to make the actual attachment to the leather though, what I want to do is I want to do the back of the sheath first. This is the first thing that I'm going to glue. So what we need to do now is remove everything that's in the area that could get overspray on it, and I'm sure that this will make you a lot happier if you do what I'm about to do. Getting everything out of here. Out, out! There we go. Now, I've spread this this towel out again because I'm going to have this stuff spraying everywhere. There's a reason for that. Once I've sprayed this thing, I'll be able to take the towel and fold it back over again, and that traps the extra glue in between the folds of the towel, and I don't have it getting everywhere in the house. So I'm going to take my cutting board off, grab my Duro glue. I don't know if you're supposed to shake this stuff or not, but I always do. It just makes me feel better. There we go. And I'm going to spray this stuff on there. Now, you can go ahead and feel pretty liberal with this. It might be the only time you'll be liberal. Anyway, that was a political comment. Let's see here. Still looks kind of whitish. There we go. It's already sticking to everything. In fact, I can feel the hairs on my arms starting to stick to each other. Now we'll stretch that out and lay this on there. Take the bottom of the sheath and stretch the leather out like so. Just pull it out away this way a little bit, so you kind of pre-stretch the leather, and that'll give you a little tighter connection. After it's all stretched, go ahead and press it down into the leather like so. This stuff doesn't take long to set up. It takes about 10 minutes or so, and it's got a pretty tight seal. In 24 hours, of course, it's basically a permanent seal. Now I've got the back of the thing glued in place. Now we're ready to do the front of the sheath. So I need to make sure I get plenty along the spine of the knife and along the top of where I put my rivets. And I'm just going to do the sheath part first. There we go. Ooh, that's gooey. Pull it over and stretch her tight. If you don't catch all the kydex, you can kind of manipulate the leather up there. There we are. See how she stretches on. And using your thumb and fingers, you can kind of draw the leather in the direction you want it to go. There we go. The harder you press on it, the more she wiggles down in there. At the same time, you're gluing both of these pieces of leather together on the side. Now that pretty much covers the sheath itself. The next thing is to do the top. Now, remember I cut a little knock out of this thing here, a little piece, to allow the knife to insert. You can see it's not. I didn't cut it all the way. I need to make just a little bit more of a slice here, if I can see. That's good enough. Not quite. Sometimes a pair of scissors don't do what a knife can do. There we go. That's it. Now this will be stretched out like so. So we'll put another layer of goop on there. Ooh. Yeah, put a little up here too. like this. Stretch it good and tight, like that. Make sure you push it down inside of where the knife is going to go. Looks like I didn't get enough in there. That happens sometimes. There we go. And that is about it. The next step is to put the knife in the sheath. The purpose of this is to help to mold the leather and hold everything in place. So now I've got the leather covered sheath pretty much ready to go. What I'll do is I'll let this set and dry, let the glue do its thing, and when I'm done I can come back through and stitch along the edge of the sheath and then slice like so and make little tassels hanging off of it. But we're also going to need to do something about this belt loop, and we'll tell you about that in just a minute. Well, the sheath has been sitting out in the sun now for about an hour and a half, so the glue is pretty well set. It's got this leather on here nice and tight, and it's not too sticky to the touch either any longer, and that's an important sign. The next thing we want to do here is we want to come along and put some stitching right at the edge of the sheath here, because I want to kind of define the edge of the sheath. Now if you don't want to do what I'm going to do, you can simply fold the leather over something like this and glue it to the back of the Kydex sheath, something like this, to define it if you like that look. But what I want to do is I want to make some little tassels that are going to hang off the edge here and give it a kind of wilderness look. But before we start doing that, that stitching, I want to show you a couple of tools that will make it a little easier. When you go to do the stitching, one of the things you might want to see is a good even stitch line going along the edge of the sheath. One way to get the stitch even is to have something like this little spur gear here. And what this does is this marks the leather when you roll over it like so. And if you put a stitch in each one of those little holes, that'll give you a good even stitch. If you don't want to spend the money for one of those tools, this is just a gear from an old clock. I tore the clock apart and took the gear out, put a pin through it, and mounted it on a wooden dowel. It's not a very good job, but it works. I'll show you. Like so. And this is a little wider spacing. So the different gears will give you, of course, thinner or a larger spacing for your stitching. That's two ways to do it. Now another way to do it is to use something like this here. This is actually a punch, and you can see it has 4 big teeth on it. The idea behind one of these is you put it on your leather and you tap it with a hammer and it makes a set of marks, and into those you put your stitches. Now you can use regular lacing with one of these because it actually cuts a slash through the leather. So regular lacing works out real nicely. Something that's helpful when you're stitching through leather is this material here. This is called Tyvek. It's actually an insulation that's used in building homes, and you can get a 4x8 sheet of this stuff for, well, they practically give it to you. I don't know what it is, $4 or $5 at the most for a big old sheet of it. But what it does is it gives you kind of a nice backing for your leather, so when you're stitching, it punches right through into the Tyvek, and you don't have to hold the other side with your finger. Some people, when they're stitching leather, hold the leather like so, and then have to push the needle through, and it stretches the leather out, and sometimes you miss where you're trying to go. But with Tyvek, you've got your spot, you spot it, just push through like that, and the needle goes right on in. For thread, I generally use this stuff here. This is called artificial sinew. Now this one here, you see, has got kind of a waxy coating on it. You probably can't see that, but it holds its shape a little better, and it's a little bit brownish looking. This one here doesn't have any kind of a coating on it at all, and some people like this because you can roll it into a thread form if you want. But it's often called artificial sinew. It's available from muzzle loading shops and so forth. It's relatively inexpensive, and you get a lot of it for about $5, like a big old roll like this. I'm going to go ahead and use the brown artificial sinew for our project here. The stitching method I'm going to use is the same as the one we showed in Volume 3 of the Woodsmasters series, and I'm just going to go ahead and push through here. My Tyvek out. There we go. Now that I got some nasty stitching in here, what I'm going to do is trim this fringe, what's going to be the fringe right around here like that. Now because of the glue over splatter, this is probably going to be kind of stuck together. Just go ahead and leave it that way. Makes it easier to cut. There we go. At that stage, oops. Now you can go ahead and pull them apart if you want to. Or you can leave them together, it doesn't make much difference. You can see how that glue sticks this stuff together. There we go. Now what I'm going to do is put a little fringe on that. I'm going to just make some little cuts in here to kind of put a fringe. Be sure to leave enough space for that thread to keep its purchase. I just kind of eyeball these babies when I do it. Nobody's going to be picking up your knife and examining it for workmanship. Incidentally, the stitching on this took a little over 5 minutes. I could have spent more time on it, but it didn't seem like something that I wanted to spend a lot of time on. As before, grunting is always a good thing. There we go. Now I got a little fringe on the sheath. You can fluff that up a little bit. There we go. That'll do its thing after a while. So we got a kind of a sheath ready now. You can see how she fits together. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take that little hole that I drilled in here and I'm going to put a leg strap through there. And I still have to decide how high I want this to hang on my belt. I don't know if I want it to hang low or high. That's kind of up to you. I like little knives like this to hang up close to my waist, so I'm going to probably go ahead and heat this and bend it close up and then just fold this over. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If I want the sheath to ride low on my belt, all I need to do is take another piece of Kydex like this, and I could cover it with leather, and then simply pop rivet that baby, or even drill holes in here and lace it on. And this then would become the belt loop on the back of the sheath. Remember, if you covered it with leather, it would look real nice. If you drill a little hole here and here, you could run a strap around to the front of the sheath, and then you have kind of a decorative strap right up there in the front. That's kind of up to you, but you can attach this in 1,000 different ways, but it's just an overlay of more Kydex. Since I'm going to wear this high, I'm going to go ahead and bend this right about in here, and this will fold down like so. When you're bending it with the leather in place, you want to make sure you don't burn the leather, so we're going to go on low, and I'm going to just heat it right in this area here. Once that's cooled off, we have a little belt attachment point here. Now to make sure it's good and tight, what I'm going to do is drill a hole through here, and then wrap a piece of leather around the front of the sheath. But right now, it looks about like that, and this will ride nice and high on my waist. Let's finish this up. Another way of closing this off, rather than putting this silly looking knot thing on there, is to make what some people call a concho. It's like a leather button. And I've got just a bottle cap here, and you know, it's beyond me to buy anything special. So I'm going to mark a little, as you see, a little round circle there, and the part I want to show is on that side there. Now what I want to do is cut this out. So I'll take my scissors. You can make this any shape that you feel satisfies your needs. Make it into a heart shape if you want, or just about anything that pleases you. Now you want to use thicker leather. This stuff is pretty stiff. It's not as thick as I would have liked, but it'll work. Then what you do is you take one of these hole punches here. This is a real handy tool. It cuts a bunch of different size holes. You can see there I could select the size that I want. In this case I want a fairly small one, something that's fairly tight. So I'm going to use the smallest size. When I use these, I like to put a piece of leather against the anvil, which is where we're doing our cutting, to help to keep the edge on this thing as sharp as possible. Now what I'm going to do is put my concho there, like so, and just squeeze, and that punches a hole through it. And then I'll do it again out here, punch another hole. So I've got two little holes in my leather button now. Next step, try to pass the tip of this through the hole. Yep. Sometimes you gotta get tricky. Bring her into a nice sharp little point. Come on, there you go. As you can see, that's pretty tight, but the leather should compress to allow you to get it in. I'll do the same thing on the other side. Maybe that's... There we go. Now, what you gotta do is pull. If you got good leather, it'll hold together. This is how they work. They kind of compress the leather. There we go. And boy, that's some tough stuff. There we go. And that kind of holds it on there. Now this could just lay like that if you want, or you could throw a knot in it. But one of the things about this little strap is you can always put accessories behind there, like a fire starting tool or something else. But this gives you a good place, a good attachment point for a little pouch if you want to make one, whatever. It is just a feature, if you want to call it that. Throw a knot in it. And she is tight. So there's the sheath with a little concho on it. Ready for the wood. When you get out into the woods, you've got two really important tools you carry with you all the time, and they're the kind of tools that you don't lose easily, but you can if you're not careful. And those tools are your hands, these babies right here. These are the things that make it possible for you to manipulate your environment. So that means that you got to protect these tools somehow. And how do you do that? Well, the best way, of course, is to wear gloves when you're out in the woods. Now, some folks don't like to wear gloves, and there's a good reason for that. When they're handling things, they can't feel through the tips of their fingers when they got big old gloves on. The tips of the gloves stop you from grabbing things real easily, so they get in the way. But still, these gloves protect your hands. They protect more than just your fingers. They protect your palm and so forth, which is one reason why a lot of folks go over to these little shorty gloves for wilderness use, something like that. Some people just call these fingerless gloves because they don't have any fingers. You can see that these kind of gloves will protect the palm of your hand, so you could pick things up, hot pans or whatever. They keep your hands fairly warm, protected from abrasion and cuts in this area and the back of your hand. And all around they're a good hand protection. You still have these fingers for fine manipulation of objects in your environment. Now, these kind of gloves here, these little fingerless gloves, if I can get them off, cost a pretty penny. Believe it or not, they're more expensive than regular gloves. But still, people go out and they spend 20 some odd dollars for a pair of these. Well, this here is one of my old gloves. And let me show you the quickie trick for saving yourself some money. Duh. Now, I want you to know that a lot of folks don't even think about this. They go, oh no, you know, those are my gloves. Well, these are a pair of gloves that I've worn holes through the fingers. So, by the way, these gloves here cost me about $10 or $12, and they get a second use now as fingerless gloves, just by cutting off the fingertips on that. Now you got these little pieces of leather, you could stick them back on like that. But the idea is you can save a lot of money sometimes. Just go out and buy yourself a pair of gloves that fit pretty good, and cut the fingers off, and you got your fingerless gloves. Good and handy. Now, in the different Woodsmaster videos, you've seen a pair of gloves, and I've had a lot of questions about these things over the years. People say, where do you get these things? What are they? Let me show you what I'm talking about here. I'm going to get that off. That's these things here. This is a kind of a special glove, and when I was working down in South America, I picked this pair up. These are sometimes called stevedore gloves. And again, they're a fingerless glove. What they do is they got a little flap here that protects your hand, double thick layer of leather, and of course your fingers are poking out, and you could do all kinds of stuff. And in some of the videos you've seen me making arrowheads on the palm and so forth. But there's better designs than this one here, and I'm going to show you one of those designs. But before we get into that, I want to show you something else. These things don't have to be complicated when you make them. This is something I made out of a piece of junk leather, and basically all this is a hand wrap. Now you can see there's a little hole for the thumb that sits there. You just wrap a piece of leather around like so, and then I got a couple of cords that I can tie off, but it protects the palm, protects the wrist a little bit, keeps your hand a little bit warmer, and all it is a strip of leather with a hole for your thumb. That's how simple these things can be, but they will protect your hands. Well, let's get on to making a pair of real fingerless gloves, something that you can make and take to the woods, and something you'll probably enjoy. I'm going to use my Tops Magnum folder for this project. When you go to make your pattern, the first thing you want to do is make sure you take off the whatever rings or things might affect your drawing. Now what I want to do is I want to have a tall flap of leather that it's going to flop over my knuckles to give them some protection. And this leather up in here, this area, is going to be the part I use. Let me show you what I mean. What you want to do is you want to start out with a drawing of your hand. So just try to give yourself a rough drawing of where everything is on your hand, like so. About like that. Now that's your basic pattern. Now, where does your hand go? Well, where are the finger holes? It's going to be, of course, on the fingers. Now, here's how we start this out. I'm just going to go ahead and draw a circle right where that finger is. and a circle about that. Don't worry too much about the size of these. Just make sure your circles are about 1/8 of an inch or maybe a little more apart. You don't want too much leather between your fingers or it starts to get annoying. And one for that. So this is the basic outline. Now when I put this on here originally, I lined it up with my upper knuckles, and that's going to be the top of my pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of taper this down and out like so, and I'll taper this side down over the top of my thumb. So it looks about like that. That's basically the design we're working with. Now when it comes down to doing the thumb, you kind of want to mark about where your thumb is coming through. And the flap for the thumb is going to need to face up into the palm of your hand. That's going to make more sense in a minute, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line and then make a hole that matches that line. This is where my thumb is going to come through. The pieces I cut out of here are only going to come out partially, like so that there's going to be a flap that drops down. Now it's easier to see if I go ahead and cut the pattern out, and then you can tell exactly what I'm doing. Now that I've cut the pattern out, you can see a little bit more about what's going to happen. I'm going to go ahead and test fit my fingers in these holes, like so, just to make sure everything's in the right spot, like that. You can see these little flaps of leather here. I leave those on because those are going to be inside to help protect the lower part of my fingers. They're just little flaps, and eventually you may want to cut them off or not. Doesn't make any difference, but this thumb flap is kind of important, and it lays over the palm right in there. But this is the pattern that I'm going to be cutting from now. So what I need to do is to transfer this pattern to a piece of leather and start making my gloves. A quick tip: this pattern is going to be useful for both hands, and this one is going to be, I just did this for my left hand, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say that this is the inside of the left hand. The leather we're going to be using is the same stuff we've used for several of our other projects, including the big parka that Karen made for me in the solo video. So it's a good full grain deer hide. Now I want the outside, or the skin side of the hide, facing out on this glove. I want the smoother velvety side here facing in towards my hand. This gives me the tough outer section facing the things that are going to be hitting these gloves. So I'm going to lay it out so that the outside now is facing down just as it is on the pattern. Something else I want to do on this. This part here is going to flap back over the knuckles, and I want to add a little bit more to it. You'll see more of that in a minute. So I'm just going to leave another, oh heck, I'll leave a little more than that on there. I'm going to leave another, inch or so on top. So I'll just go ahead and line this out. Of course, all my drawing now is taking place inside the part that's going to be away, the part that's not going to be visible on the outside. Now this is my big flap here. I'll bring it down and pick up the same tapers. Once that's on there, I'll just go ahead and draw where the finger cutouts are. Now remember, leather stretches a little bit. So if they're a little bit tight, that's okay. And you got to remember that this flap here is going to be facing in towards the fingers. So that's the basic pattern for the glove. That's all there is to it. So we'll go ahead and cut that out and see what we've got. Now that I've got a kind of a palm cover going on here, and I've got my finger holes and my thumb hole cut out, we're going to make this thing fit the hand. Now what I want from this glove is I want it to give me a little bit of wrist support, and I want this leather to come back on my hand, and I want it to join kind of at the midline of my hand, right in the back here, on this here. So I'm going to cut a little bit of leather off of this flap here because it goes over too much. And we'll just figure that out. I'm just going to make a little dot so I know about where to cut it. This is about the middle of my hand and right about there. And I'll just slice that off. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. About the midline of my hand, which is about here and about here. I'm going to cut this piece off. And what will happen then is these two pieces will join at the center, and I'm going to put some lacing right up the middle. What I've done now is I've trimmed it a little bit so it's not quite touching, well, I guess it is touching down the midline of my hand. And remember, this is done right on your hand because you don't want to try and make a pattern for this. This is with the leather. So it's going to get laced up right here. So we'll go ahead and cut some lacing holes, or punch some lacing holes in here and lace it up, and I'll show you the next step. I've just gone ahead and folded the two halves here over each other, and I'm going to punch those little lacing holes about a ½ inch or so apart and in about 1/3 of an inch. I'm just going to use some paracord to lace that thing up. Later on I'll switch over to leather. Just melt the end of it and draw it out a little bit. Now that it's laced up, I'm going to go ahead and make the knuckle protection, and that's this extra flap up here. What will happen is I'm going to fold this down and punch a couple holes to pick up the top lace, so it'll lay down against my hand like that. But basically, there's a hand protector right there, kind of like a little glove, and I can use this one here when I'm finished with it to make the other hand. So let's go ahead and finish this up. First thing I'll do is mark where I need to punch my 2 holes to hold the flap down. Now that the flap is stitched down, what I'll do is I'll take this extra material here and just trim it off like so. What we'll do is we'll come back later, or I can anytime I want, and I can stitch this down if I feel like it. There we go. When you're working with leather, it's inevitable you're going to end up with some small pieces. Now, I never throw those things away because there's a use for them, and this is one of those uses. This is a little leather, well, I guess you could call it a toggle button, or a button if you want to call it that. But basically it's just a piece of scrap that I turned into a usable button. Let me show you how to make those. The first thing I did is I took a piece of scrap here and I split it into 2 strips that are about 6 inches long and about 1.5 inches wide. And I'm just going to work with one of these strips to make my, my button. Start off by slicing off the strip like this. The next thing I want to do is I want to cut from one corner to the other down in here. This may not be exact, but it doesn't matter. There we go. Now that'll actually make 2 different buttons. So what I'm going to do is I'll start with this piece here and show you what we actually do to make a button. What we want to do is we want to figure out which side is going to be the outside, and I want the outside of the leather to be the outside of the button, and I'll just roll it up with the outside in like so. Make a little cylinder and roll it as tight as you can. Some people actually stretch the leather with get it wet and then stretch it. Now I've rolled it part way up. Now right in here I want to cut 2 little holes. I'm just going to mark it with a pen. Normally I wouldn't do that. About like that. You can see I've got 2 little spots right there. I'll take it and I'll pinch it right about there, and using my handy dandy hole punch, punch a hole through the leather like so. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to take this here. I was going to have to insert into these holes, and to make that easier I'm going to trim it out a little bit so it's a little pointier like so. That way it'll be easier to get into the hole. The next thing is roll it up again like this. When you get it about rolled up, bring your leather around like so. You see these two holes, this one here and this one here? What I need to do is put the point from the leather into these two holes. I'll go into the back one first and then out the forward one like this. Now this is sometimes a little bit tricky. There we go. And like that. Now I'll just pull it through. Now since it's leather and you want it to be tight, it might be a little hard to get through at first, but just work it back and forth with your fingers, and eventually you'll end up with something that looks like that. Now you may want to make it a little neater than that. See, I've got a big lump right here. The way to get rid of that is to make sure that you scoot this leather I made it pretty tight here. Scoot this leather in all the way. Make it really tight. There we go. It's kind of awkward. Some people use vice grips and things like that to hold the leather when they're doing it. There we go. And that makes your little button. So I've got two different sizes here. Of course, this is a wider piece when I started. This is a narrow one, and it's a duplicate of this piece here. So if I want another button the size of the first one I made, just do the same thing again. I had another piece of scrap leather left over from the projects here, and what I want to do now is I want to use this for something, and the thing I want to use it for is a little possibles bag. And this is kind of a cool thing. A lot of people don't know how to do it. But I'm going to start with this piece of leather, and I want to get the biggest possible bag out of it. And there's a certain design I want to use. To do that, I'm going to use these compasses here. This is called a compass, and this one's been in the family for about 100 years and looks it. But you could pick these things up just about anywhere. And what I want to do is I want to find out how large a circle I can draw in here. And there's just a quick little idea for doing that. What you do is you kind of estimate the size of the circle you might be able to get out of it, and figure about half of that on your compass. So I'm just going to adjust this a little smaller, and I'm going to set the one point at the edge of the leather, and then I'm going to try to draw an arc across the leather like so. Now I've got a little arc going right along here. Now I'll go to the other side of the leather and I'll draw another arc like so, and this makes like a little moon in here. I'll go to the other side, draw another partial arc, and over here, well, I can see that right about in here is going to be the middle to get the largest possible circle out of it, like that. And that's because I've got one arc going this way, one arc going that way, and I'm in the middle. So now what I'll do is I'll start drawing a circle, and all things being equal and the stuff don't move too much, whoops, it's right on the edge, I will be able to get a pretty good size possibles bag out of this. Remember, since it's leather, you can fix anything in, as we call it, post-production. There we go. Now, you might be able to see that I got a pretty good sized circle cut right out of the middle, and I managed to get that because I drew these little half moons in the thing. Now that I've drawn my circle, I'm going to go ahead and cut out my my piece of leather here, roughly on that circle. I don't want any of this stuff to look too good. It might look professional then, and then people won't think that I made it. That sounds silly, but it's the truth. Only machines do perfect stuff. In South America, they have a saying that if it's perfect, your life is over. So I always make mistakes in anything you make. I make sure that I got a good long life by making lots of mistakes. There we go. And now we've got the basic circle for my possibles bag. Now the next step, I want this to be on the outside of the bag. So the next step is I'm going to fold this thing over about like so. And you can see it doesn't line up perfectly, but that's fine. This side's good. That side's got a little schlaga in it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to punch some holes here and one down here. And I'll show you what that'll do. I'll just take my trimmer. There we go. One halfway. One halfway on the other side. This is about halfway. And they're all about 1/4 of an inch in. And one here. And one here. There we go. Now that gives us a good start. Get these little googies out of here. There we go. That gives us a good start. What I'm going to do, excuse me. Whoa. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to punch holes halfway between each of these holes. And this is what we're going to thread our drawstring through. So I'll just go ahead and do that now. And again, this is just approximate. Now you can see I've got a series of holes clear around the outside of the little purse or pocket or pouch that I'm going to make. So the next thing we want to do is lace it together. For this project I'm using some leather laces. These are just Latigo laces. And what I did is I started my lace like so and evened them up so that I've got even length lace on either side of these two holes. Now what I'm going to do is just lace in and out through the leather that's going to be the purse. I'll go in and out like so. And we're going to do this with both sides and with two of these laces. And I'll show you what's going to happen here. If you did the hole punching the way I showed you, you'll be starting on the outside with your lace and you'll be ending up on the outside. And this is going to be a pattern that will be repeated again with another lace of the same size from the other side. So what I usually do to make this lacing go a little faster is I trim the points. You'll probably figure this out yourself. It took me 15 years to figure out that I should make these things sharper so I could get them in. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on the opposite side where the two ends came through, go in the same holes like so. Get out of there. Like that. Make sure that they even up again. There we go. And follow the laces back. Now remember, I came in where the other holes, the other pieces of leather came out. So I'll just follow the lace right back through, like so. There we go. Now, these are the two sides of the pouch. These are the two sets of pull strings. I'm going to go ahead and tie a little knot in these loose ends. This is just to keep it from going back through the holes. Get the knot. There we go. That's one. And another. And there it is, a little purse. Now it's just a matter of neatening it up and fluffing it all out, and we got our little coin purse or possibles bag or whatever you want to use it for, with two good strong ties that you can use to tie it around your neck. Now there's another thing you can do. You've got your little leather buttons here. You can put a button right on the side of the purse here, and that way you could hang it directly from a cloak or whatever else you happen to be wearing. Just stick this through a buttonhole and it'll hang from that. Gives you another little security feature. Sometimes in the Middle Ages they would put those on there with their coin purses to make it harder for a purse cutter to steal your purse. I'm just going to make a couple little holes like this in here. Then I'll pass this through here and through the other hole like that and tie a knot. That little knot there will keep this thing from pulling out easily. But there's another way to do it that's kind of cool. Let me show you what I mean. You saw how I punched two holes here to hold that button in. Well, if I punch a third hole like this, I can take this loose end, pass it through to the inside, and on the inside you can see the strap from the button going through the two holes I initially punched right there. So what I'll do is I'll put this under that strap like so, and then when I pull on the button, the strap here that goes to the button will tighten down on this one and hold it in place. See if I can get that just right. There we go. So it looks like that. It makes a little cross underneath inside the purse. But that makes a pretty secure tie for a button on the side of your purse. Bingo. And there it is. Now there's one more interesting thing about this design, and the reason I like this kind of a bag. If you make a large enough one, now see this one here is just large enough for my fist. I want to put that in there. I don't know why I would, but if you make it a little larger like so, it's a hat. You can put it on your head. Now, sort of a pocket hat if you want. It looks a little goofy. This is not a good hat, but if you make a big pocket, you can actually carry stuff in your hat, and then at the end of the day, if you get cold, you take the stuff out of the pocket, use it, and put it on your head and keep yourself a little bit warmer. Something they used to do in the Middle Ages, and something you might want to do someday up in the mountains. We hope you enjoyed this volume of the Woodsmaster, and I want you to know that most of the skills we showed you here down in the basement of the Hood's hovel are things that you can do out in the wilderness. Just bring the stuff with you and go to work. A little innovation, and you can even work kydex out there. Well, that's it for this volume. In the meantime, we hope to see you on the trail.